thank you for everybody for joining another AmTrust webinar series on remote realty technologies disrupting commercial real estate. This has been sponsored by Steve Napolitana, the Senior Executive Vice President at AmTrust Title, and also special thank you to Laura Gilmore, who's VP at AmTrust Title, for inviting me to curate this webinar. So by way of introduction, I'm Nikki Greenberg. I'm the founder and CEO of the leading global networking and PropTech education organization, Women in PropTech. I co-chair the ULI Tech Council in New York, and I also lead the Real Estate of the Future consultancy, where I help real estate organizations navigate technology and innovation. So today, technology is more important than ever, especially in the climate that we're sitting in. So in commercial real estate, what we've been seeing for a long time is that the way that it's being designed, built, and operated is it's been the same way it's always been done. There hasn't been that much advancement, even though the way that we live and the way that we work is so different. You know, you just need to think about the way that we shop, the way that we communicate, the way that we work, the way that we're entertained. Everything is web-based, and yet the industry hasn't caught up. So today is a very exciting time for us because we're really testing about, well, how can our spaces suddenly adapt to a very digital reality? So for us in the technology space, the COVID crisis, while it is absolutely terrible, and I commend all of the frontline workers for the wonderful work that they're doing for us it's become a great opportunity to really not only test, but really use the technologies that are available. Now, if there's just one thing that you take away from today, I'd just like to encourage you to think about the long-term impacts of any decisions that you're making, because the decisions that we make today for our businesses and for our buildings, they're going to have a long-lasting impact. So just think about it. In New York, for example, the average commercial real estate building is 80 years old. So we really need to have a future-forward approach and to think about the opportunities that are available in the long term. So today's topic's one that's very close to my heart, and I've invited an array of really fantastic speakers to join us on this topic. There are people that are leaders in their industries, and there are also people that are really not just focused on today, but focused on the future. So I'm going to introduce them one by name. We might start off with Steve Yotsuga, who's the Director of Sales at Combat Telecom, which is a global wireless infrastructure system. He's a longtime board member of the Maryland DC Wireless Association and co-chair of NEDIS, an industry-led infrastructure association for Connected World. And he's also the host of NEDIS Live Infrastructure podcast. So his area of specialization is really talking about the internet infrastructure that goes into our buildings. Steve, would you maybe mind just saying a few words about yourself and your interests? And thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nikki. Happy to be here. Yes, so my focus is infrastructure solutions. That includes commercial and public safety communications inside of buildings for emergency responders. And this is such a hot area right now in the country, but also in the world. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. I would like to introduce you next, Mark Spector, who's the owner and principal of a leading architectural practice, Spector Group, who works across many disciplines. And Mark, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words about yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Situated here on Long Island, working remotely from our Long Island office. I'm Mark Spector. I'm principal of the Spector Group. We are a full-service international architectural interior design master planning firm based here in New York, all working remotely. What the definition of remote is individual to everyone, and it's going to be a topic that we will discuss today. And pleasure to have been invited to this webinar, and I look forward to providing guidance as we see fit. So thank you, Nick, for arranging, and let's have a great conversation.
Great, thank you very much. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to the brilliant Michelle Francis, who's head of product at the cutting-edge marketing technology firm BlingBuy. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. You know, I'm delighted that you can be here and bring an out-of-industry viewpoint for some of the learnings that the commercial real estate industry can take from your industry.
Yes, right. And BlingBuy is a technology which actually puts this knowledge layer over video that hasn't really been seen before, and I really look forward to talking more about it.
Great. Maybe as a start, I know, Michelle, when we were talking previously, Bling Bar is one of those things that's very new to people. Did you want to maybe just give an example about how, what you're doing, with Bling Bar? By way of introduction, I know that you've been doing a lot of work with big media providers like HBO, the Air Force, another big media company, another, huge sports organization.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to just let people know what it is?
Yeah, because, we've been like last 3 months been super busy. It seems like these brands, these companies have really wanted to accelerate what we have to offer. So, we're really excited to be working with HBO, and we're doing a big campaign coming up soon with the Air Force, and we're working with other media companies. And basically, I can give you a little example, if I could just show my screen quickly, what we're doing. Just see if you can see. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So basically, I want to just show you here. What we do is we take video. This is on HBO. This is on their website. And basically, we are taking their video. And what we do is with this knowledge base, you can click on here and you can see what HBO is offering. You can get HBO, sign up for subscriptions. There's a knowledge base about the series, what's coming new, more that's on HBO. This is a new series that's coming. You can watch the trailer. So it's like this, and it doesn't interrupt the video. So you're getting this knowledge base, whether it's something, it could be anything. Like the Air Force is going to be using us for recruiting and training and learning, and we're doing ad campaigns with them, programmatic campaigns with geo targeting. They target the person that's in the recruiting office that's absolutely just there. So it's just really exciting. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get back to there we are. Can you see me? Or you just still see my screen?
We're seeing a little bit of your screen. You can play around a little bit. I know we're not all that familiar with WebEx.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find to stop. Here it is. There we go. Here, and then, okay, there we go.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So you can just see a little bit how it works with the visual. It's not it doesn't interrupt the video. We work live and with live events, and with real estate, it's a really great way of getting to see property. Like right now, as you know, most people are using video to show property, and there's a lot of technologies I know out there that are using like 3D imaging or different ways of showing the property. And what this does, it really gives the people in the industry, like, what is the marble? Like, what are the fixtures? What are the tools? What are the different things that people, like, even if a drone flew over the house, like, you could give so much information, like the restaurants in the neighborhood, the farmers market. So it's just all this knowledge that people are searching for. They want to learn more. And in our industry, we're learning, people don't want to be sold to, they want to learn more. And that is the biggest call to action we're seeing. So in this environment, I think it's really crucial that people are getting as much information as they can. And it's really important that they get the right information. And with our technology, you also control that information. So all those tiles, they go to exactly the information you want to show, whether it's a download or whatever it is. So the person isn't off Googling trying to figure out what you meant. So it's very powerful, and I feel like it's a very timely technology where people don't want to be interrupted, or they don't want to be sold to, and they want to see things on their own time, and it never leaves. So it's just always there for people to come back to and learn more.
Great, thank you. And I think that's one of the main reasons I invited you today, because I think it's so important for the real estate industry to understand what are the cutting edge innovations that are coming in the broader media industry. I worked in real estate marketing for a long time on, huge developments, which is, how I know of, how I know Michelle and the Bling Buy team. And especially in this environment where everything's remote, what we're doing or what we're seeing in the industry is a scramble to do virtual tours. But really what we want to be doing is like adding that extra layer of sophistication. Once you're done with survival mode, it's like, what can you do next? So I think it's a very exciting tool for, for people in the real estate industry to explore. But Steve, when we were talking before the other day, and I'm so glad you could join us as leader in, in infrastructure and 5G, because it's really, we're all seeing it today. We're working from homes. We're working from holiday homes, which weren't meant to be workspaces. So the importance of having great infrastructure as the basis for any development is becoming very obvious, especially when we get terrible loading times on, I have a lot of friends in finance and they're trying to trade from home, and this is important to them. What I love, one of the things you said on the call the other day, you said that we're now seeing the decimation acceleration for those businesses that weren't adapting. So how important is it to innovate and adopt technology? And what steps should commercial real estate be taking in the long term and the short term to adapt to our new reality?
Sure. Well, I mean, you look at how it's affecting most everyday lives, with online school 2.0, how people are interacting with the Zoom or GoToMeeting, whatever type of medium folks are using, tons of bottlenecks now at home. And that wasn't happening before because, perhaps, kids in the neighborhood are all on Netflix because school's finished earlier and the demands are pushing more. And obviously the bottlenecks are becoming a lot more sensitive today. And so you look at, what are these artificial pushes that we've had in the past? And the pushes before were, let's have this smarter city. So you look back with the Department of Transportation back in 2016, that was the initial catalyst of the Smart City Challenge, where it was to build infrastructure inside of cities. You had 77 cities apply, and to create all different types of infrastructure solutions to avoid food deserts, to improve jobs, to improve communication, to improve telemedicine, and all of those things. And it was a great concept at the time, and obviously a number of cities have really pushed. In particular, I would say there was a list of maybe about 15 top cities that have really pushed this. And I recall years ago, Lake Nona out of Orlando was the first digital city. And so, all this types of movement, how does this affect commercial real estate? How does this affect the commercial real estate market? Well, what's happening today is, obviously you look at, the disruptor models that have changed into a micro approach, where rather than one tenant, you've got 10 tenants or 20 tenants all in the same building, and they're chopping it up and they're doling it out. And so the realtors have to be more disruptive in the way that they're looking at it. But it goes back to technology because of the experience. These communities were much larger communities because a WeWork or Convene, you'd have larger communities from lots of different companies in this either tech incubator or the ability to work and network together and utilize each other's resources. It's back in the old days of the 1800s in the Wild West, when people would go back and work with the jeans and the iron and building tools and getting guns and everything else, and it's all in the same shop. Nowadays, people want to have that same type of community and that same type of blend. So you look at what originally was this slower movement when you talk about 5G, when you talk about public safety communications and what was happening, but now with COVID-19, it's really become a big push because it's innovate or die. And you're looking at cutting edge speeds before with 4G, but now moving to 5G, it's 100x faster. So think about the requirements and the needs and the abilities of what you could do with that. One of which would meet directly with the types of problems that we're facing with COVID-19. And part of it is heat sensitivity, part of it is IoT enabled devices, but all of this wraps around smarter buildings, and that deals with better infrastructure, better communications. The other part is when life is on the line and you need to be able to make an emergency phone call. How is your in-building public safety network? Are you able to communicate effectively? Are they utilizing fiber optic networks? Are they utilizing channelized technology? So those are a myriad of different things to look at. But certainly, COVID-19 has been devastating to so many small businesses and medium-sized businesses. I've seen personally that many projects had been suspended indefinitely. The silver lining in that is that it's indefinite and it's just suspension, meaning that these projects are going to come back up once people can come into these buildings. Because it's essential work for public safety, that's not impacted as much, and it's continuing to push. The good news, and I see that the potential bottleneck is, let's say September, everything opens up. This is going to be a major bottleneck challenge because you've got all the past jobs that people have had with infrastructure or improving technology, and then all the government spending that needs to be completed before the end of the year. So that's definitely a conundrum, and that's going to cycle up very, very quickly. So it's going to be interesting to see that over the coming months.
Great, thank you. We've had a question come in just asking about how you can assess the security of systems. Especially they reference Zoom, GoToMeetings platforms, etc. But I suppose we can also, if you can comment on again the fact that we're working from home, where there might not be the same kind of security on our infrastructure versus an office, and what commercial real estate operators should be thinking about.
Absolutely. I'm not really sure how technical this audience is. I'm not sure if we're going to get into massive MIMO or beamforming or full duplex technologies. I'm not sure if we're going to get into all of that right now. But let's just look at Wi-Fi 6, for example, compared to 5G/4G network. So there's a high propensity of buildings to be able to have ample coverage for 4G, or they're ramping up to have sufficient 4G coverage for simple phone calls and to ensure that there's communications inside of a building. With Wi-Fi 6, that's a tremendous technology. There's lots of great benefits for it. One of the challenges or the opportunities with Wi-Fi 6 is the security element, because security compared to the encryption capability of cellular networks, whether it's going to be on a public safety band, a low T band, or 700-800 frequencies, it's a much easier to be able to communicate. The same thing goes with utilizing any of the big carriers, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon. Utilizing those networks, there's a lot of folks that use their data networks. Now, a lot of folks these days are utilizing their data networks because a lot of the carriers are providing free data for the user because of COVID-19. But that's more of a Band-Aid right now. Long-term, it's ensuring that you have ample network and infrastructure inside of your building or a mixed-use property to ensure that you have that coverage and handoff. That could be a blend of Wi-Fi 6. It could also certainly need to be focused with ensuring that you do have public safety, full coverage within public safety, because the public safety networks are in the hard to reach areas. It's ensuring that mandates are in the stairwells, the elevator shafts, where for the operator and commercial use, it's all the common areas. That's where you have that blend between the two technologies.
Steve, what about artificial intelligence? How does that come into play here? Because I know, look, we're involved right now with a company called Satisfy Labs that does all conversational QA on the back end for live entertainment, and we're introducing them into the real estate space for that very simple QA if they're doing virtual tours through different properties, in real time, where you can get that AI QA. What are your thoughts on how AI will come into the play with this?
Well, everyone works on a microwave society right now, and we've got very short attention spans. We've got very high expectation that it needs to be immediately available. And right now that attention span is even shorter and the requirement and demand is even higher. So with that, when you're talking about AI, you have to be able to have, it's removing as much latency as possible. And when you're talking about 5G, for example, with 100x the capacity or 100 times the capacity requirements, there's a lot that needs to get built out. But at the same token, with 5G, you're being able to exceed at speeds that in some cases hundreds of times faster than your 4G speed. So that really eliminates quite a bit, and it also opens a lot more doors. So let's just say, for example, I saw a technology that was introduced just the other day to me that's using thermal mapping for body temperature for people coming into a building, or they're going into whether it's going to be a hotel and checking their temperature to make sure that they're not above a certain threshold, so that more people can go into a public area, and it's being able to cover that. Well, that's going to be tied into technologies like access control. It's going to be tied into your IoT so that you're all on the same network, and you can apply that on quote unquote the same type of platform. So it's you have that usability.
The only issues you're going to really run into are privacy issues, number one. Number two, people's temperature varies. So what's the threshold of normalcy? So we're working on the thermal scanning as it relates to placing it architecturally and curating it into lobby spaces, so it's not apparent when you walk in that you're being completely monitored, though you know that you are monitored. The larger problem is you're talking about lines that could conceivably be queuing up out of a building in New York City, waiting to enter, get access, go through this whole scan technology, and then wait again at an elevator where you're going to be waiting again to go up the elevator. And then so if you're in your office at a certain point and you're going to go out again, you're going to have to repeat and do it all over again. It's a wash and repeat type of cycle that has not been vetted yet. That is what us as architects are struggling with, to find the right solution for our client who are landlords. It's very tough.
What's happening in China now in the office buildings, where you're only designated to your own floor, not like WeWork where you can jump around, or in any buildings now, when we can go back. But in China, you can only be on your floor. You can't leave. And if you do have to leave for a meeting, it's through Zoom or through how we're communicating right now. So they're very controlled on how they move. Is that
going to work in New York City? No. We're going to have to come up with something that does work, and that's the reason why, I think we're delayed in opening until we get a lot of these things satisfied.
Let's look at short term. Let's look at short term and long term. So short term, Ed, is safety and security. Long term is convenience and the ability to be able to have a better user experience. So that user experience could be all of the struggling retailers that are in the marketplace today, to be able to hang on to IoT technology to create differentiation and separation, and that user experience of being able to come in. It also creates that 2.0 of sport venues, where you might be at a sport venue and it's more important for you to follow your fantasy football or basketball team while you're watching the game, even though you bought a ticket, but it's more important for your fantasy game. But that experience is going to be a multiplier as well. But I think short term, and short term could be 1 year, 18 months, is having that feel of safety and security.
Yeah, well, I think we talk about New York a lot.
So because the older buildings in New York are going to be much more costly than the newer ones being built to have these new features that we need.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is that when I'm speaking to people in China, what they're saying is that they're actually bringing in behavioral change, because behavioral change doesn't cost anything, whereas bringing in new infrastructure has a cost associated with it. So that tends to be the short-term fix, alternate days in the office. But what's quite interesting, and especially for most of us on this call, we're based in New York, and 9/11 saw a lot of change to our built environment. Now that you have to, check in at security, for safety measures, same as at the airports. What we're having is, now it's a health and safety check. But the wonderful thing, because I'm a silver linings kind of person, the wonderful thing is that when we can identify a problem, it's fantastic breeding ground for innovation. because we know what the problem is that needs to be solved. So how can we go about solving it? And I suppose, Mark, that's kind of my question to you as being the, one of the designers in the group as an architect. I know you work on a lot of workplace projects. I know you work on retail and hospitality. What are some of the innovations that you've been seeing? What are some of the discussions that you're having with your clients about, short-term and long-term strategies to be able to go back to work and to be able to maintain their offices and that sense of community and culture and let's be honest, then also being productive. Working from home is not for everyone.
Right, but remote working is not necessarily working from home. It could be wherever you are outside the office. So just a couple of quick facts that we learned today. Facebook will not be returning to their New York offices until December 2020. Just announced. They are closing all their offices. Everybody will be remote in the New York City area, which is a second largest, obviously, to their West Coast presence. Microsoft is not returning to their New York offices until October 2020. So you're seeing now these large tech companies that are putting safety first for their team members versus bringing everybody back to work until there is a clear understanding of how we're going to get people to the office, which is more important, which is more difficult as to once they actually get into the office.
And Mark, I ask you, what are they actually going to be doing with their empty offices then? Because I should hope they're still paying rent.
Well, you would hope that those that can afford to pay rent continue to pay rent. We're continuing to pay our rent. We don't want to get into a deferment situation where you have a payment of substantial amount of money due at the end of that deferment period. So my philosophy is if you can afford to pay it, you should pay it to keep the economic engine moving forward. If there is absolute distress and you can, yes, then you work out with your landlord, revised, payment options for sure. But, Steve said it, there's a transition period that we're dealing with, and then there's a long-term thought process. Are we going to go into a redesign of what the workplace looks like as we knew it only 8 weeks ago? So think about that. We've only been in this for 8 weeks. That is a very, very short window. And decisions should not be made hastily that could affect an entire long-term lease or even the next generation of the workplace. I believe that once we get closer to what's going to be a vaccine, we'll get back to where we were, and this will be in the rearview mirror. COVID is never going to go to zero, period. The flu doesn't go to zero. Other major yearly types of viruses don't go to zero. So we will ultimately have a good grasp on this. So knowing that is that we have to deal with it in real time. And that's what's getting done right now. And that's really what's being vetted by our firm and some of the other big firms here in New York and around the United States, with the American Institute of Architects, to put together a cohesive voice of what we're seeing and what we're now advising and being hired by our clients to guide them through phase 1 of transition, which is sanitization, HVAC possible upgrades, the introduction of plantings for air purification in buildings that may not be able to be updated, marrying all of these protocols to wellness and health, which is now going to come to the forefront and kind of combining these together for the workplace. And then we have the local law 97, which nobody is discussing, which is looming over the city of New York for 2024 compliance, which every building in New York City over 25,000 feet must be carbon neutral at different thresholds from 30, 40 to 50. And think about that for a moment and what that means from a sustainable standpoint. So these things all have to be looked at short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And
I think one of the other components, Mark, and you bring up a couple of good points, is this push and pull. And we talked about this push and pull the other day, was that the push and pull before was the push towards creating the need for smaller rent space and more tenants in the same building. Short term, though, if you're looking at it with that 6 feet of separation, with the eventual slow roll of the employees going back into the buildings, whether it's going to be any major city, you're looking at more space. So that push and pull is when they do go back in, they are going to require more space. So, you know, you've got.
But not necessarily. If you look at the open plan environment where we're seeing square foot per person in the low 100s to mid 100s, which is different than what was the investment banking model where per square foot per person was in excess of 200 square feet. So if we had a dense environment, let's call it a financial services space where everybody's in a benching setup and they're fairly close to one another, we had an area of that space, in that office space, which was much wider and open for collaboration, for meeting rooms, conference rooms, for large bistros and pantries, for food and for gathering. Those spaces where we were wide open are now going to be absorbed into a different footprint, possibly as we expand the personal workspace per person, because we are not going to be gathering in conference rooms tight. We're not going to be gathering in food service areas. It's going to become more of temporary of a grab and go situation. So we're going to be able to eat up square footage without increasing the footprint of one's office space.
You're looking at that community feel. You're looking at the old community feel of the WeWork, Convene, you know, some of the other disruptors, Regis, whatnot, that have a major community area, and that community area is going to be disrupted. And how is that going to be looked at and sliced and diced? There's a couple different ways of looking at it. Ultimately, it's got to be safety first. So, you know, the first focus is hitting that safety side. The second side is long term. How are they going to address this? Is this going to be a scale back? I can see that the investment, from an investment standpoint, there's been the investment movement from real estate and commercial real estate to the movement of investing in infrastructure. So there's been this pendulum shift of the traditional real estate investment to the investment of infrastructure solutions itself. So the ownership of the infrastructure with a small community, whether it's going to be maybe a retail location or a small business community, that's also a driving force as well.
Yeah, well, it's going to be different per user. We have clients that have instructed us that on large scale that we don't want to do anything from our tight footprint. We want to just have proper cleaning and sanitization protocols, but we're not going to be reconfiguring our workstation setup. We may introduce some temporary desk shielding between workstations and offices where it creates an environment of safety and defears the workplace, but those are temporary solutions. Those are projects that are completed. I'm sorry, Nick, say again?
Well, this is the thing, and this is why I go back to talking about the short-term and the long-term solutions, because, you know, as Mark's describing, it's like, well, you can clean. We can all clean. We can all bleach. There are some fantastic robots that clean. But if you are going to a scenario where you're reconfiguring the entire layout of an office, you're bringing furniture in, you're bringing furniture out. But then what we're talking about here is fundamentally needing to design for flexibility. And that's something, you know, talking about modular. I know with Notel, they can put an office up and down within the span of 3 days because they don't have a lot of fixed infrastructure. So there is a lot of clever solutions out there. But I think one of the things fundamental within all of this, and this is something that we all know about, is that at the end of the day, it's about behavioral change. And it's about convincing people that, yeah, you need to do the right thing. You need to stay home or wear a face mask, or, you know, put your arms out and don't touch anybody, or stick some little, you know, wires out so you can keep your, keep your personal space. And one of the ways that we've seen to be quite effective, which I can speak to personally, watching, you know, Governor Cuomo, he comes up on my Instagram feed every day, giving me my little update. And I suppose, you know, Michelle, that's a question, you know, towards you, you know, especially sitting in the social media space, you know, what should we be thinking about? Like, what are you seeing, you know, what kind of interventions are you seeing about communicating through, you know, the different platforms that perhaps the real estate industry can learn from to do this in an effective way as we go back to work, to really have that buy-in from, you know, from all of our employees, from, you know, from our colleagues, from everybody, to have, you know, a great conversation around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's all about information and just about social media and video. I mean, video is going to be 80% of the way we communicate. in 2021, 2022. I mean, it's just the way people are communicating right now. And through social media, those are the most shared posts. Those are the things that people are looking at. And I think just from video, like you say, you see, you know, Como come on and he's doing everyday updates, and maybe it's just a short video of something amazing he said. But I think through video and through like what we do, you know, the knowledge information you get from the video is so important moving forward. Like, you know, especially if there are updates on COVID or something like that, that you can blast out through social media, well, Instagram, Facebook, you know, Twitter. You know, it's just an informative tool that we can use. And in regards to real estate, I mean, I know that a lot of the realtors, agents are really suffering right now because they're not getting clients into their homes or that they're selling, or apartments, or showing office building, commercial spaces. I mean, it's really difficult.
Well, I could.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry?
I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Michelle. I was just going to comment on that. There are a couple of outliers when it comes to the commercial real estate marketplace for the utilization of video and really being able to embrace the technology. I feel that based upon, you know, with COVID-19, there's been such a high utilization for the use of video chats, where just a few years ago it wasn't used very often at all. Now it's just become mainstream, and it's so used as such a critical communication vehicle that obviously it is tied in with infrastructure and the need and the necessity to have proper technology to be able to help support it. But you know, some of these commercial real estate companies who are innovative have been able to adapt quickly and really utilize you know, this type of medium. Many are not, but there certainly are some outliers that have done a nice job.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is to really be able to utilize the technology, especially in these times, that it's really important to be able to communicate what we need to communicate without being able to meet each other in person. And you know, whether
the big concern is that interpersonal communication, face to face, when you're with someone, you can pick up people's body language and cues, voice tones, everything as it relates to how they're feeling and how they're commenting. If you can't do that via text and you can't do that via email. And so what we're seeing a lot now is a lot of misunderstanding in communication of people wanting to say something, and whether it's an emoji that's the wrong emoji or an exclamation point after or okay, all of these things on a text. So we are trying to move our whole platform in our office completely internally to a video conference. So when we do our cocktail hours, we do our Monday morning get-togethers, you know, you either are on video or you're not participating. We need to see you. I just don't want to hear you when I know you just have to turn on your camera.
And this is not going away. I mean, even before COVID, I was speaking at a university, and you know, Generation Z. I mean, they were like, I asked the question, how many of you get your information by reading? Or, you know, maybe one or two hands. How many get your information by video? Like, every single hand went up in the classroom, and I was just, it's intuitive for them, and you know, they don't like to be told things, they don't like to be sold to, they like just to find and learn on their own what's important to them. And I think that's the future, and this is just something that is accelerating what was going to happen anyway, just we're all sort of getting on board because we don't have a choice. So I think it's the future, and the people that can figure it out the fastest are going to be the most relevant.
No, I agree. And it's also to save companies monies in travel time, commuting time.
I mean, how many businessmen have been flying? You know, I've had friends say, my gosh, you know, maybe 50, 75% of the world travel. Maybe I didn't, you know, maybe it could have been half that.
No, I agree with you. You sometimes, most of the time, you still need to get with that person live, and at least in our business on the creative side.
Yeah, and I think both are extremely important. I think it's really important to see people in person, like you said, and read them. And, you know, I think that also is so valuable but it's kind of adapting, right? In this new
I'm
world. And
gonna
it's good to blend it. It's good to, maybe less than
I'm going to throw in a statistic that I absolutely love and I use all the time because I do a lot of research and talk about generational trends with Generation Z and millennials. Millennials get a lot of slack for the way that we tend to work, but Generation Z, which is the next generation coming through, along with millennials, in 10 years' time, we're going to be 75% of the workforce. So think about it. The way that we're used to communicating, ordering food, interacting, everything's digital. And especially if you're Generation Z, the younger generation, whereas, millennials, we text message, we send emails, we're from the IRC, ICQ generation. Some people are going to be rolling their eyes at remembering those platforms. For Generation Z, they sit on FaceTime. They have a few devices going at a time. They're used to Alexa, Siri, Google Home, etc. They're used to video. And kind of the irony in all of this is that as you get to the more technologically comfortable, the digital native generation, their preferred mode of communicating is, dare I say it, it's seeing people and talking to people, which is kind of where the technology is going.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Right.
I suspect that we'll be seeing a little bit. I suspect that we'll be seeing a little bit more of this at the moment. Mark, there's a little bit of a shout out to us from Talia McKinney from the Servant team.
Hi, Talia.
So thank you very much. Well, guys, we're going to conclude very soon because I want to be mindful of time for everybody. But just as closing remarks, I'd like to ask all of you, and we might go in the same order as we started with Steve, Mark, and then Michelle. I want to ask about, as I said, I love to keep things positive in these discussions, but I'd like to ask about, what you believe could be the silver lining that comes out of this crisis as it pertains to technology and innovation.
Right. Well, obviously, again, this has really been such an incredible impact to many people throughout the world. If I were to look at a silver lining, this has really helped. From a silver lining standpoint, it's helped impact and accelerate some of the technology requirements that are needed today. It's really helped put this under a magnifying glass with where we're at today in terms of the needs for better infrastructure technology, the needs for better public safety communication systems, the improvement of cellular connectivity and Wi-Fi connectivity inside of buildings. So those simple building blocks, I think, are really kind of the silver lining behind all of this. I think the other point that you were saying before, Nikki, was you're talking about obviously the different generations, and you and I have talked about this before. And as a Gen Xer, and having a lot of angst as typical Generation Xers do, being the building block with a very small, we're only about 50 million compared to the new generations that are about 80 million each. So we have to look at adoption. We might be slower to adopt, but we're that important bridge and gap with the baby boomer. And I think that as we continue to kind of help push the envelope, maybe it's because of COVID-19, maybe it's because of other pandemics that are facing us, or maybe COVID-19 too. We just have to look at that and how do we face that and continue to push. So thank you.
For me, this is the World War II of our generation. So this is a once in a lifetime, hopefully, anomaly. And it gives you an opportunity to make changes, to look at yourself as an individual, as a human being. Are you kind enough to others? Self-reflection is very important. I'm keeping a journal every day of what is occurring during this period, so I have something to remember this by. The time being spent, with family that wasn't not supposed to be, those that have moved back into the home that were out, is lucky and fortunate, and rebonding for myself and our team, my home team. Innovation will rise out of the ashes of this. There is no doubt. Tremendous innovation. not necessarily from my generation, from those that are coming out of college. And what we're going to learn and see from this group will be our greatest heroes. I expect, as I said, we will land from this. We will be bumped and bruised and banged up, but we're all going to land, and we're going to dust ourselves off, and we're going to take off again to greater heights. And I know as an architect, you know, we are considered essential and valued in this stage, and we don't take that lightly. We have a huge responsibility to the general public to assist in maintaining the safety and health of where people work, live, pray, and play. And we will rise to that occasion and meet those tasks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Steve and Mark. That was really beautiful. I mean, I agree completely with what you both said, and I'm so grateful for just being in the position that I mean, we all are in. And I think that there's so many silver linings. I think that, innovation, right? The saying is a necessity. It comes out of necessity. And I think we're at an amazing time for innovation. And I really believe that it's really gonna, it really shows you who you are, and there was things that Blingby did that we weren't expecting to do. Our CEO, she commandeered like a few 3D printers, and one of our employees at Blingby, Rachel, husband, knows how to work them, so made so many of these masks, and we gave them to the hospitals in Queens, and now we're sending them to India. And it's like, it's amazing feeling. Like it's not necessarily what we do, but we were able to innovate and really do things that we never expected. But at the same time, just so grateful. I just feel a lot of gratitude. And I want to thank you, Nikki, for inviting me today, and really wonderful panel. I learned a lot.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You as well.
Right.
Yeah, and just as a little wrap up, I think the big thing that we've learned about today, I think is a beautiful way to end, is just thinking about this crisis in terms of gratitude for the frontline workers, and also about being able to bring about positive change, not just in our personal lives but in our professional lives. And to just second what Michelle said, I'll mention that I was born in South Africa. I grew up there, and they're going through an absolutely terrible, terrible time. I'd like to encourage everyone to think about people that don't have to actively contribute. We're very fortunate that we do have, when the appeals do start for third world countries, developing countries, please do remember these people can't go it alone. They're very vulnerable. But I will end on a positive note. I think, we've got to just remember that out of every crisis comes innovation. I read an article today in Fast Company where they were saying that the financial crisis is what really was the birth of the gig economy. So the freelance work is everywhere, and the change that's brought. So I feel that this could almost be gig economy version 2.0, with a lot of people needing to hustle if they haven't been able to, maintain their jobs, and they've needed to find different ways of working. That can bring about so much more innovation. And, as a New York resident, I'm very excited to see what the people of New York come up with, because there's always some kind of crazy extra way of expressing themselves. So, Steve, Mark, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here today. And a special thank you to Steve Napolitana of AmTrust for inviting us here today. And to Anushka, who's in the back end, who made this all happen. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed being part of it, and stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much.